The minister spoke about love and acceptance as I stood there in the pouring rain at my brother Leo's funeral, but all I could do was force out a bitter laugh that cut through the solemn crowd like a knife. My old buddies from high school joined in slapping my back as if it was some kind of joke, while inside the guilt I had buried for years started clawing its way to the surface. The cemetery on the outskirts of Chicago looked peaceful under the gray sky, but today it felt like a battlefield where I was fighting my own demons. Leo had always been the bright one, the artist who painted murals on city walls and wore his heart on his sleeve as an openly gay man. At 28, he had built a life full of friends and color, while I at 35 had climbed the corporate ladder as a finance executive in a downtown firm, keeping everything neat and controlled. The rain soaked my suit as the casket lowered into the ground. I could not help the smirk that tugged at my lips when Ethan's voice cracked during the eulogy. Ethan was Leo's partner for the last 4 years, a kind graphic designer who had organized the service with rainbow ribbons and photos of Leo smiling at pride events. My parents stood nearby, Mom dabbing her eyes with a tissue, and Dad staring straight ahead, his jaw tight the way it always got when anything challenged his old Midwest values. They had never fully accepted Leo, and in a way I had fed that fire pretending it was for the family's sake. My buddies Jake and Tyler chuckled beside me, whispering about how Leo finally got what was coming after all those parades. I laughed along, but each sound felt hollow, like I was mocking myself more than my brother. The service ended and people hugged and cried while I hung back near the trees, avoiding eye contact. Then Ethan approached me, his eyes red but steady. "Maximus, Leo left something for you," he said, handing me a thick manila envelope sealed with Leo's familiar blue wax stamp. "He wanted you to open it after the service alone. It is important." I took it, my fingers numb from the cold rain, and muttered thanks before turning away. The drive back to my apartment in the Loop was silent except for the wipers slapping against the windshield. Sarah, my wife of 6 years, called, but I let it go to voicemail, not ready to explain why I had laughed at my own brother's funeral. Our marriage had been strained for months, her sensing the distance I could not name. I parked in the garage and rode the elevator up to the 10th floor, my heart pounding harder with each step. Inside the modern space with its leather couch and city view, I sat at the kitchen table and tore open the envelope. Inside were handwritten letters, a small journal, and a flash drive labeled for Max. The first letter began, "Dear Maximus, my big brother. If you are reading this, I did not make it, and I am sorry for the pain, but I need you to know the truth I carried for you." My hand shook as I read on. Leo wrote about our childhood in the suburbs, how we played catch in the backyard under the summer sun, how he looked up to me. Then came the part that stopped my breath. "I saw you that summer after your freshman year with Jordan, the guy from college. I saw the way you looked at him, the kiss in the garage. I never told anyone because I loved you, and I knew how scared you were. When I came out at 18, your rejection hurt because I thought you would understand. But now I see it was fear talking. Brothers, stop hiding. Live for both of us." The words blurred as memories flooded back. I remembered the backyard games, the laughter, the safety, before everything got complicated. Leo had been 15, then full of questions, and I had brushed them off, telling him to toughen up. Tears stung my eyes, but I wiped them away, angry at the weakness. This could not be real. Leo had known my secret all along, the one night with Jordan that I had buried as a mistake, a college experiment never to be repeated. I stood up, pacing the room, the letter clutched in my fist. Outside, the rain had stopped, and sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow across the floor. I could not face this, not now. But the journal called to me, its pages filled with Leo's neat handwriting. I flipped it open and read another entry dated 2 months ago. "Max still pretends everything is fine, but I see the cracks. If I go first, I hope this forces him to face what I always knew he was." My chest tightened and I slammed the journal shut. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of denial and flashes of our shared past, the arguments, the silences, the way I had distanced myself after Leo's coming out to protect my own image. By evening, Sarah came home and asked how the service went. I lied, saying it was fine, just sad. But inside, the secret Leo left behind had already begun to crack the walls I had built so carefully. The letter continued on the next page with more details that made my stomach twist. Leo described the night he accidentally saw me and Jordan in the old garage behind our parents' house the summer I was home from college. He had been sneaking out to meet friends and instead witnessed something that changed how he saw me forever. I had told Jordan it was nothing, just curiosity, and ended it the next day, swearing never to speak of it again. Leo wrote, I protected you, Max, even when you turned your back on me. When I told Mom and Dad I was gay, you stood there silent, then later called me selfish for rocking the boat. But I knew it was because my truth mirrored yours. The words hit like punches. I closed the journal and stared out the window at the Chicago skyline, now bathed in evening light. Sarah made dinner in the kitchen, chatting about her day at the marketing firm, but her voice sounded far away. I nodded at the right moments, but my mind replayed the backyard scenes from our youth, Leo and I tossing the baseball, laughing until our side hurt. Those days felt innocent before society and family expectations taught me to hide. After dinner, I excused myself and drove to the old neighborhood, the suburbs where we grew up. The house looked the same, white siding and the big oak tree in the front yard. I parked across the street and sat there remembering the day Leo came out at 18. He had gathered us in the living room, his voice shaking but proud. Mom cried, Dad yelled about sin, and I said nothing at first, then later in private told him to keep it quiet for the family's sake. He had looked at me with hurt in his eyes and said, I thought you of all people would get it. I had walked away angry at him for seeing through me. Now alone in the car, the guilt washed over me like a wave. Back home, I plugged in a flash drive. It contained a video of Leo recorded weeks before his death. He sat in his studio surrounded by paintings, his face thinner, but eyes bright. Max, if you are watching this, know that I forgive you. I knew about Jordan because I followed you one night, worried you were in trouble. You looked happy with him, freer than I had ever seen. Then you shut it down and shut me out. Please find peace, brother. The video ended and I sat in silence, the apartment dark except for the screen glow. Sleep did not come that night. Instead, I lay awake replaying every choice, every word that had pushed Leo away. By morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in years. Sarah noticed my distraction and asked if everything was okay. I snapped that it was just grief, and she backed off, her eyes worried. The journal pulled me back, and I read more entries about Leo's life. His art shows his love for Ethan, the pain of family holidays where Dad made comments, and I stayed silent. One entry hit hard. Max paid me to keep quiet about Jordan that summer, $500 to forget what I saw. I never spend it. It is in the envelope. I checked, and there was the cash, faded but real. My hands trembled. I had bought his silence and then betrayed him when he needed me. The day passed in a fog of memories and self-loathing. I drove to Leo's favorite coffee shop near his apartment and sat in the corner remembering how he used to drag me there for Sunday brunches talking about his latest project. The barista recognized me and offered condolences. I nodded, but inside I felt exposed. That evening, Ethan called to check on me. We talked briefly, and he mentioned Leo had wanted me to have his sketchbooks too. I agreed to meet him the next day at Leo's place. As I hung up, the weight of the secret settled heavier. Leo had carried my truth for years, protecting me while I mocked his life at his own funeral. The realization stung, and for the first time I wondered if I could ever make it right. The next morning, I drove to Leo's apartment in Wicker Park, the sun shining brightly on the colorful murals he had helped paint on the building walls. Ethan met me at the door, his eyes kind of spite the grief. Come in, Max, he said, leading me into the sunlit space filled with Leo's art canvases stacked against walls and plants thriving on the windowsills. The place smelled like fresh coffee and oil, paint, a far cry from my sterile apartment. We sat at the kitchen table, and Ethan handed me a box of sketchbooks. Leo said you might need these to understand. I opened one and saw drawings of me from childhood, the backyard games, the family trips to the lake. Then later sketches of me at family dinners looking distant. Ethan watched quietly, then spoke. He loved you, Max, even when you pushed him away. He told me about the college thing with Jordan, but only after we had been together a year. He said it explained why you reacted so strongly to his coming out. I felt my face heat up. I did not know what to say. Ethan continued gently. Leo did not blame you. He understood the pressure from Dad, the town, the expectations. But he hoped you would find your way. We talked for hours about Leo's life, his struggles with acceptance, the joy he found in his community. Ethan shared stories of their travels to national parks, Leo painting landscapes at sunset. I listened, the mocking laugh from the funeral echoing in my mind, now replaced by shame. As I left, Ethan hugged me briefly and said Leo would want you to be happy, Max, truly happy. Back in my car, I opened another sketchbook and found a note tucked inside. For Max, when you are ready. It contained Leo's thoughts on identity and how hiding eats you from inside. The drive home felt longer. At work the next day, I sat in meetings staring at spreadsheets, but my thoughts wandered to Jordan, the guy from college, now probably living openly somewhere. Sarah sensed the change and asked again what was wrong. I told her about the letters, but left out the details about Jordan. She hugged me and said grief does strange things. But I knew it was more. That night I searched online for Jordan Hayes and found him a teacher in California, married to a man with kids. His profile showed a happy life. I closed the laptop, my chest tight. Leo had been right. I had hidden for so long that even at his funeral I mocked to keep the facade. The following days blurred into more reading and reflection. I visited the cemetery again, this time alone, standing at Leo's grave under bright sunlight. The stone read, "Beloved son, brother, partner." I whispered an apology, but it felt empty. Ethan texted inviting me to a small gathering of Leo's friends to share memories. I hesitated, but agreed. At the gathering in a bright community center, I listened to stories of Leo's kindness, his art helping youth programs. One friend mentioned how Leo always defended family even when they hurt him. The words landed hard. Back home, I confronted the mirror in the bathroom, staring at my reflection, the man who had laughed at his brother's funeral. The secret was forcing cracks in my armor, and I was not sure I could stop it. Weeks passed, and the letters became my constant companion. One entry detailed a family dinner after Leo's coming out, Dad slamming the table, and me saying nothing to defend him. Leo wrote, "I saw the fear in your eyes, Max, and it broke me because it was the same fear I saw when you sent Jordan away." I started journaling my own thoughts late at night when Sarah slept. The words came slowly at first, then poured out the confusion, the attraction I had denied, the loneliness. Work suffered. My boss noticed and suggested time off. I took it, grateful for the space. Sarah and I argued more, she feeling shut out. One evening I told her about the college experience with Jordan, keeping it vague as curiosity. She looked hurt but said we could work through it. But I knew the marriage was cracking under the weight. I drove to Leo's studio one afternoon, the sun streaming through the large windows. Ethan had given me the key. Sitting among the paintings, I felt closer to my brother than I had in years. A canvas showed two figures in a backyard, one older, one younger, tossing a ball. It was us. Tears came then, and I let them. The next day, I contacted a therapist recommended by one of Leo's friends. The first session was hard, admitting the denial, the mockery at the funeral. The therapist listened and said confronting the past is the first step to healing. I left feeling raw but lighter. Sarah suggested couples counseling, but I declined, needing to do this alone first. Then came the call from my parents. Dad wanted to talk about the will. Leo had left some money to an LGBTQ youth center, and Dad was upset. I defended it for the first time, saying Leo lived his truth and we should respect that. Dad hung up angry. The confrontation left me shaking, but resolved. That weekend I met Ethan at the lakeside park, the sun sparkling on the water. We walked the path talking about Leo, his dreams, his last days. Ethan shared how Leo worried about me until the end. I opened up about the secret, the letters, the college story. Ethan nodded without judgment. Leo knew you would need time, he said. The conversation stretched into evening, and for the first time I felt seen. Driving home, the city lights bright, I realized the secret was not destroying me, but freeing me. The mocking at the funeral felt like a distant mistake from another man. But the journey was far from over. The therapy sessions continued twice a week, unpacking years of repression. I learned the mockery came from fear, the same fear that made me distance from Leo. One session I recounted the funeral, the laugh, the buddies, and felt sick. The therapist asked what I would say to Leo now. I wrote a letter to him, pouring out the regret, the love I had withheld. Ethan and I met regularly, sharing meals at Leo's favorite spots. He introduced me to Leo's circle of friends, artists, and activists who welcomed me without question. One evening at a gallery show featuring Leo's work, I stood before a painting of two brothers under a bright sky and felt a surge of pride. Sarah noticed the changes in me, the openness, the tears. We talked honestly and decided to separate amicably. It hurt but felt necessary. I moved into a smaller place near the lake with big windows like Leo's. The journal entries guided me. Leo had written about visiting the national parks, painting the vast landscapes, feeling free. I booked a trip to one he loved in Wisconsin, the bright forests and trails calling to me. There alone on a hike, I shouted my truth to the trees. I'm not straight, and I am done hiding. The words echoed, and something shifted inside. Back in Chicago, I reached out to Jordan through social media. He responded, warmly surprised but open. We video called, and I apologized for how I ended things. He forgave me, saying he had wondered about me. His life looked full and happy. The call ended with him encouraging me to live authentically. Inspired, I volunteered at the youth center Leo supported, talking to young people about acceptance. My first talk was nerve-wracking, but the kids' faces lit up, and I felt purpose. My parents called again, Dad still angry, but Mom softer. I invited them to lunch and shared parts of the letters. Mom cried, Dad listened quietly. It was a start. The friends from the funeral, Jake and Tyler, reached out curious about my time off. When I told them the truth about my journey, they reacted with surprise but support. One admitted his own struggles. The circle widened. Each step built on the last, the secret from Leo becoming the catalyst for change. Tension peaked when Dad visited unannounced. He sat in my new apartment, the sunlight flooding the room, and demanded to know why I was changing everything. I showed him the journal entries, Leo's words about protection and fear. Dad read in silence, his hands trembling. He admitted the family had been hard on Leo and on me indirectly. We argued about society expectations but ended in a hug of first in years. The next day, I faced the office. Colleagues whispered about my divorce and time off. In a team meeting, I shared briefly about losing my brother and finding myself. Some nodded, others looked uncomfortable, but I stood tall. The backlash came from an old client who pulled business, citing my changed views. It hurt, but I saw it as the price of truth. Ethan and I organized a small memorial hike in Leo's favorite spot. Friends gathered under the bright sun, sharing stories. I spoke last, thanking Leo for the secret that saved me. Tears flowed, but they were healing. Jordan flew in for the event, surprising me. We talked for hours, walking the trails, and he shared how he had struggled too. His presence gave me strength. Back home, Sarah and I finalized the divorce papers over coffee. She wished me well, and I felt gratitude for the years we shared. The internal crisis had passed, replaced by clarity. I started painting again, simple sketches of the backyard, memories inspired by Leo. The mockery at the funeral, now a lesson in what fear does. I confronted the buddies who had laughed with me, explaining the harm. Jake apologized, Tyler distanced himself, but I accepted the losses. Each decision brought consequence, but also growth. The family dinner at my parents' house felt different. Mom cooked Leo's favorite meal, and we talked openly about him. Dad even mentioned the youth center donation he was considering. The night ended with laughter, memories flowing freely. Acceptance deepened as I threw myself into honoring Leo. I helped curate an exhibit of his art at a local gallery, the opening night bright with lights and laughter. Standing before the crowd, I spoke about my brother, the man who lived bravely, and the secret that taught me to do the same. Applause followed, and for the first time I felt proud. Therapy wrapped up with tools to navigate the new me. I dated, casually meeting men through friends, no rush, just connection. One evening at the lakeside park with Ethan, we sat on the bench watching the sunset. He thanked me for stepping up. I thanked him for being family. The hug we shared felt like closure and beginning. Work adjusted, I took on pro bono cases for LGBTQ causes, finding fulfillment beyond spreadsheets. My parents visited more, Dad asking questions about my life, showing effort. The past no longer haunted, but informed. I visited the grave, often bringing flowers and talking to Leo about progress. One sunny afternoon, I left the journal, there a symbol of release. Friends noticed the change, the lightness, the authenticity. Jake joined me for a hike, and we rebuilt the friendship on honesty. The sacrifices, the lost client, the divorce, the strained ties, all led to this peace. Leo had traded his silence for my freedom, and I vowed to live it fully. The final memorial event brought everyone together in the community center, bright with Leo's paintings and photos. I stood at the front, sharing the full journey from mockery to understanding. Ethan spoke of love, parents added words of regret, and friends celebrated Leo's impact. Jordan attended again, his smile encouraging. As the evening ended, I felt whole. Walking home under the city lights, I stopped at the lake, reflecting on the path. The secret Leo left had forced every confrontation, every tear, every choice leading to this man who no longer hid. Life continued with new purpose: volunteering, mentoring, painting. Family bonds strengthened slowly but surely. Leo would be proud. Was Maximus right to initially mock the funeral as a way to cope with his pain, or was it an unforgivable betrayal of his brother, true or false?